because without them, we wouldn't be able to have this amazing event. A little bit about me. I am a Salesforce certified technical architect. As some of you know, it's a CTA. I'm also a B2B and B2C certified solution architect. 32 times Salesforce certified. Got my golden hoodie at Dreamforce 21 during the first ever architect keynote, and it was for an architect community that I built for preparing for the CTA review board, which is now open to anyone, so you don't have to be going for the review board. A little bit more about that later. I'm also a Trailblazer MuleSoft mentor. I have a developer background in software development, 17 years in Salesforce. I'm the founder and CEO of BlizzTech Consulting. I'm also the founder of Scalable Arcs nonprofit to educate underserved and underrepresented as architects to train them in the architect career path. Also Boston Architect Music Group leader, founder and admin of the Architect Ohana Slack, which is what I was just mentioning, and organizer for Northeast Dream and New York Architect, which we're going to be having tomorrow. Or also, this is part of it as well, the architect track. So first we'll go through the CTA journey. So here's the pyramid that a lot of you are probably familiar with. At the top you have the technical architect, and then you have your domain architect, your application and system architects, and then all the prerequisites for those. So I always recommend people to plan about 1 to 2 years for preparation and to practice mock. So this includes studying, gaining the knowledge, and then the actual preparation for the board, because there's a whole bunch of strategies around preparing for the board. Also, you want to be able to identify your gaps early on and figure out where you need to focus. So what are the areas you're really going to dive into to build up your knowledge. Also, you want to be able to work with a mentor or a group of mentors. So the Slack group kind of takes a group mentorship model, and people help each other. But you always really want to have at least 1 or 2 people you can go to with all your questions. And then I always recommend having a small study group of 4 to 5 people. You should meet daily when you start getting into your serious preparation. That way you can have discussions and help each other. And this is really critical, and I would say in building the mindset. So this is what the Slack group offered to people on their journeys and why it became so successful. And then you want to present many mock review boards to a mentor or community judges. And then last but not least, you want to have a plan and follow it. So some traits that I'd like to identify in CTA. They have a thirst for knowledge. They can effectively communicate. They are curious and like to do R&D to see how things will work. They have experience. They show confidence. They have leadership skills. They're critical thinkers. They're lifelong learners, and they're also future thinking. So they're not just thinking about what's good for now, but what is going to scale and what's going to be good for down the road. So I wanted to point out some traits of like how an architect would think versus how a CTA would think versus an architect. So some examples here are an architect will gain extensive platform knowledge. But when you go to the CTA level, you're also expanding out to the enterprise level. So you're gaining enterprise knowledge. The architect will know when to use platform features versus going custom. So this is specifically for the Salesforce platform. The CTA will think about what will be lowest risk for the project and bring the highest ROI beyond that. Architects usually understand basic integration patterns. The CTA will understand which pattern to use and when and why, and how to secure the data between all systems within the enterprise. The architect also will know how to handle data on platform, whereas the CTA will understand what data should really be kept on platform and when to move it off platform. So this involves archival strategy and triggers for when to move data. And the architect will understand platform security features, but the CTA will understand the best security mechanisms to use for each system within the landscape. So some keys to building a CTA mindset. So you want to gain extensive platform knowledge, but you also want to gain knowledge of common enterprise systems. So you want to be able to understand what business functions the different systems perform. So you might have an ERP. You want to understand what data is going into an ERP, when you would want to use the ERP, when you'd want to use an ERP versus Salesforce, things like that. You want to be familiar with common app exchange apps. So some common ones that we get familiar with through the CTA process are document management, document generation, payments processing, etc. You really want to understand integration patterns and the tools to share data between systems. So this would be something like an ESB or an ETL, and then you want to be able to understand when to use each one and for what situations. You want to build up, this is an important one. So there's another presentation today about building up the decision making for a CTA. So you want to build up these mental decision trees based on your knowledge. You gain a bunch of knowledge, and you're basically assembling these decision trees within your mind, and then you are able to make the right decisions based on the inputs you're getting from the business. And then you also want to be able to understand the risks and how to mitigate them properly of the decisions that you're making. You want to think about the ROI of your decisions. So this is a hidden one that I think gets overlooked a lot, but you always want to think about what is the return on investment of the solution that I'm proposing. Is this going to be good for the business? Is this going to be good for the long term? You also want to be precise and concise and understand the right keywords to use. So you want to use language that can easily be understood by the business. So you're taking complex technical terms and you're communicating them in a way that the business users can really understand them and understand the impact that your decisions are going to have. You also want to be able to take the lead and propose a well-argumented solution. And then also answer questions and objections precise and concise when they are brought up when you propose your solution. You also need to justify your decisions and communicate the value. So that's what, when you're thinking about the ROI, you would be able to communicate, why is this important? Why is this going to bring value to the business? So we always say a CTA has technical knowledge plus business acumen plus communication skills. So these are kind of the three pillars that really go into building that mindset of a CTA. So one of the most important things about a CTA is they recommend optimal solutions. And I'll say this for any architects. This is something any architect wants to be able to do. So you really want to think about the options, but recommend the optimal solution and understand the pros and cons of each. You really want to understand the considerations of your choice. So you think about things like scalability, performance. Will this scale over time? So that's where the future thinking really comes in. So you really want to understand the trade-offs of other choices. So you could go with something that's fully custom, or something that is a Salesforce out-of-the-box solution. And you want to be able to understand the trade-offs between going each way, and then be able to look at the risks and how it might impact your project timeline. So these are things that CTAs are really thinking about. It's not just recommending a solution because it's going to solve the problem, but bringing in all these other things as well. You really want to use your knowledge and experience to make your decisions. And then when you make your decision, like I said before, you're going to defend, you're going to justify, you're going to communicate and your recommendation effectively. So this is really the why of your decision, what factors went into making it. You really want to be able to get that across. You want to do that in a way that's very precise and very concise. So another key area for your mindset is understanding performance, scalability, and security. So I mentioned this before, you want to understand how to secure your integrations between systems. So you want to know the different ways you can implement OAuth with Salesforce and maybe even other systems in your landscape. So maybe you have something like AWS, or you want to bring in another system that maybe supports OAuth. What kind of OAuth would you use with that system and why? An example is you want to use the JOT token for your server-to-server integrations, likely. That's a very common one. Also understanding things like one-way and two-way TLS. So where and when would you want to use it? This is very important in your enterprise landscape. Also data privacy, so understanding things like GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, PII. Why are these important? How do you make sure your data is secure? How do you enforce these things, and how do they affect your overall end-to-end solution? And then data growth. So this is really going to affect scalability and performance. So you should understand how data is going to grow over time. How can you evaluate that? How can you calculate that? How are you going to determine if something's going to become a large data volume? And how will that affect your performance of your system? So this is where you want to start thinking about an archival process. So what's going to trigger data to be moved off platform? Where are you going to move it? How will this work? How are you going to bring that data back into Salesforce if you need to? Not moving it back on platform, but how are you going to expose it to your internal users and your external users? And then on platform, you have your data visibility and sharing. So what data should users see and when? So maybe they don't always see all data. Maybe there's some criteria that has to be met for them to see certain records. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're determining who can see what and why. And then integration patterns. So even the different integration patterns that you choose can affect your performance, and it can also affect user experience. Another area that I find really important is understanding business value. So this is the business value of your decision. So a really common one is maintainability. This is the clicks versus code. You hear about technical debt. Is your solution going to create technical debt or lower it? You really want to try to go with simple out-of-the-box solutions that can sometimes solve the problem. So this is lower cost, lower risk. And you also want to go with solutions that bring the higher ROI. Those are more desirable. That's going to bring more business value. And you really want to avoid the solutions that will create the technical debt, like I mentioned. So this is also goes into total cost of ownership. So think about the total cost of ownership over time. So maybe it's more expensive now, but over time it's going to be less expensive, as opposed to something that's less expensive now, but it become more expensive down the road because of maintenance and technical debt. Also, thinking about time to market. How fast can you get the functionality to your end users? Because at the end of the day, you're building for your users. You want to get things to them quicker so they can do their jobs better, they can do their jobs faster. And also, there's times when you might want to change a process to fit what's already out of the box. So users might be doing something one way, but you could propose them doing something a different way because there's a feature within the platform that can actually get them to the end result that they want a lot easier. And then thinking about licensing costs. So when you're choosing the right licenses, platform, service, versus sales, or if you need both sales and service, you really want to understand what they actually need and make your decisions based off of knowing what each license can give your users. So you don't want to just get everyone sales and service, because that's obviously going to be expensive. Another area that I find really important, and there's another session happening right now on this, thinking about user adoption. So UI, UX is an important aspect to think about when designing your solutions, because your users are the ones that are going to be using what you're designing. So you really need to understand how they're actually going to use the solution. So you want to think about driving user adoption through your solution. Things like, how many clicks does it take for a user to perform a task? Can you use a screen flow to help with a complex process? So maybe they're not going to 5 different places to do a bunch of different things, but you're giving them a screen flow where they can do everything in one place, and then you're making the life so much easier for your users. That's going to drive user adoption. And then something I touched on earlier, will your integrations have an impact on user experience? So if choosing a request reply integration versus a fire and forget, which is an asynchronous pattern. So if you have a system that's maybe not going to respond right away, and the users can get blocked with what they're doing, and so maybe they don't need a response back from the other system, so you could go with the asynchronous fire and forget. The user can move on in their process, and then a response comes back at a later time, and then they can go check it. You can maybe even set up a notification for them to go see the result of that external integration. Something that I like to teach and have people work on through their CTA journey is process mapping. So you would take a set of requirements and you would use a process map to understand what the users are doing, how they're operating on the data, and what integrations are happening through your process map. So there's a lot of trailheads now on process mapping. I believe it's in like the business analyst and UI UX and the strategy designer trails. It's a little bit more functional, but it's really important for understanding how the users are interacting with the system end to end, and it can help drive your solutions and user experience to be more holistic. So you want to be a trusted advisor. So really the idea of a CTA is to be that trusted advisor for the business. So a trusted advisor, they have the ownership and the role. So the ownership and the role of the trusted advisor differentiates an architect from a consultant dev admin. So of course a consultant dev admin, they're coming up with solutions and making recommendations, but once you step into that CTA role or you start wanting to build that mindset to move towards CTA, you're really taking ownership. So you can even think about product ownership, or even a product owner. CTA product owner can sometimes go hand in hand. You're the one that really is advising on process and best practices. So thinking about things like DevOps and governance and even project management. So these are things that people aren't always aligning with architect. They think architects are developers, which is not true whatsoever. You do not need to be a developer to be an architect. Also, architects are providing guidance and mentorship. So this is, and I can't even stress this enough, you need to be that person, the beacon that's leading your customer through their whole journey and their delivery of a project. You really want to be the one that takes the responsibility for the success of the project. You also want to engage with your stakeholders. So you really want to stress how something solves a business problem, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to help the business. And you really want to be able to explain the benefit to the business. So explaining how something will be less risky than another option, how will it benefit the project timeline, how will it mitigate risks, especially when you get into bigger projects, more global projects. These types of things just become so much more critical because this means money, sometimes millions of dollars when making decisions. So. And you really want to look at the big picture. So that's where your future thinking, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, not just today. So when thinking about things like data volumes and data growth, you want to look at how that data is going to look down the road, probably 5 to 10 years, and when you're going to move that off platform and why, and how you're going to make sure your system's scaling and performing 5 years from now. So solidifying, building your mindset, you really want to understand the business problems. That's the key. You have to have that understanding of what the business is trying to ask of you. Then you want to move to identifying potential solutions. And then something I didn't really get into much is the diagramming and the presenting. So you want to create diagrams to explain and communicate what you're trying to present to the business as your solution. So practice presenting to other people you're studying with or people in the community. It doesn't have to be a full CTA mock, but you can take some requirements from a practice scenario and solve it and then present it to someone telling a story. This way you can build up those communication skills. And then you always want to be reviewing with a mentor. So you might want to ask questions, you might want to present to a mentor so they can give you feedback, they can help you with areas of improvement, things like that. I have a whole list of recommended readings. So this is a list that I provide to anyone that is in the Slack community. So some of this is really CTA focused, but a lot of it's just really for anyone on the architect path. So I really do believe that even if you don't want to go for the CTA credential, all the things I talk about, you can build that CTA way of thinking. You can build that CTA mindset. And you can start stepping into that role of the trusted advisor and playing that role of what a CTA would do. don't have to have the certificate to actually function as a trusted advisor technical architect. Exactly. We've got one right here. She knows. And you don't need to. So it's just a whole other strategy that goes beyond all of this that I talk about. So. And then some resources. So lots of resources. So the first one is the Slack that I've mentioned. We also have a YouTube channel where we publish some of our presentations. There's also the Betty Locks CTA study group. Got some members in here. Salesforce architects. We've got Ladies Be Architects, the founder sitting right here with us. We're graced with a legend here. Gemma Blizzard. We also have the architect community. That's the Salesforce Trailblazer architect community. Apex Hours has a lot of great resources. There's also the Salesforce Architects on Medium. Jumba's own blog. I've used that myself through my own journey. We got Susanna Kate Playstead, she's here today. And the CTA Gang of Four. And something I don't have up here is, oh no, it is there. The Salesforce Architects, architect.salesforce.com. After this session, there's going to be a session on Salesforce Well Architected. I am a Well Architected ambassador. I probably should have put that at the beginning. The Well Architected framework is going to also help you build the mindset. So it's got a lot of information, and it's going to help you build up the decision trees and the decision-making abilities based on the information that they're presenting in the Well Architected framework. So I think the Well Architected framework goes really well with preparing for CTA. And the CTA is a different framework, is how I explain it. It covers about 7 different domains, and you can take the Well Architected framework and apply it to the different domains. And I have some QR codes, so if you would like to join the Architect Ohana Slack, there's a QR code. Also the Scale Up Arcs, if you're interested in finding out more of that, if you want to apply, we have that there. The website I don't think is live quite yet. Should be soon. And then we have the Salesforce Architect Group Paris. So right now they're running on meetup.com. They're waiting for Salesforce to put through the official Trailblazer group, but they're trying to get organized now before that happens. So anyone that's local, if you want to join, that's their meetup.com QR code. And that's it. Thank you for attending.